So do you want to, I will just stop sharing so we can see my face at the beginning, okay? Yeah, so we can, yeah, exactly, much better.
Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Legal Creative first live global event. We are live streaming here on the YouTube. So all of the participants, if you are seeing this, it means you managed successfully to enter the webinar. So welcome to you all. We are extremely happy to have you. We've had more than 75 people who registered to attend the live. So we are thrilled to host you and of course to future wonderful speakers who are coming from more than 10 countries across the world in order to present today live some really interesting, innovative topics, products, research, and methodology. So the way this conference is going to work, we have different conferences room, just like in a regular conference, but it's all online. We are starting with the opening session with Charlie Garland, who you can see here, who is sharing my screen. Charlie Garland is from New York, and we are so glad to have you, Charlie.
Thank you, Tessa. So I'll share my screen here.
Let me introduce Charlie. Well, Charlie is going to share his screen. Charlie Garland is a business strategy consultant, a coach, a trainer at the Innovation Outlet, specializing in innovation, creative problem solving, and cognitive optimization. He designs his own and modify existing innovation tools, mindset models, method, and metrics, and he delivers these to clients as assets for improving the business and professional practices. So today he's going to be talking about Innogotation, applying innovation mindset, model, method, and metrics to radically reinvent the negotiation process. Charlie, you have the stage.
Thanks very much, Tessa. So as Tessa just mentioned, this is the title of the presentation today, and I'm going to be, excuse me, I'm going to be talking to you today about a number of topics related to creativity, innovation, and negotiation, and how they can all work together for lawyers as well as anyone else who may be involved in any sort of negotiation process. Many of these topics involve fairly deep, detailed explanations and evidence that I won't have time to present in this half-hour window, but I do hope you can set aside your skepticism just temporarily and accept that what I'm telling you is true and that I can and will gladly provide you that detail at a later time if you're curious to learn more. So we're going to start with mindsets in this cycle. And for mindsets, every human being, no matter how smart, well-educated, accomplished, or powerful, is affected by cognitive bias. We all suffer from some negative consequences from the biases that we all share at one time or another, and this helps form our mindset. What makes this especially problematic, though, is that very few of us realize this fact. Mindsets powerfully reflect our beliefs. The result is that we naively believe, or you might say assume, that we don't have any such biases. We may remain locked in the status quo, the conventional wisdom. We wind up assuming that our thinking, our logic, our reasoning are perfectly sound as they currently stand. Most of what I'll describe here can be better understood from Daniel Kahneman's best-selling book, Thinking Fast and Slow. So the assumption that we have no biases is truly not the case at all. We make assumptions all the time that are incorrect. They may not be completely wrong, but even if they are just slightly off base, this can drastically affect the accuracy of our belief system, the quality of our thinking, the direction of our speech and behavior, and ultimately the results that we hope to accomplish. Most of the time, our assumptions are implicit, or more specifically, they affect us subconsciously, without us being consciously aware of it. Now, a few common false assumptions that we make in negotiations include some of the following, usually applying to both parties and often subconscious. Examples. Number one, any gain that the other party achieves must come at my expense. Therefore, the other party's motivation is not only to generate a gain for themselves, but also to generate a loss for us. Number two, the position or demand that the other party has made is the only position they will settle for, with no exceptions. all other positions are irrelevant. A third one is the only ways to be successful in this process are to A, convince the other party that they should be willing to settle for less than they're asking for. B, to make them feel guilty that our side has already suffered. C, to simply beat them into submission, wearing them down emotionally, etc. Number 4, there's only one solution to this problem. Number 5, the resources that I'm currently considering are the only resources available to me or to the other party to help resolve this dispute. And the 6th one is value gained or lost should be measured solely in terms of hard dollars, as well as immediately, and so on and so forth. These are just a few common misconceptions that occur in the negotiation process. But what this might look like graphically can be shown in the following 3 images. You start in the conventional negotiation process. You start with the typical starting point where the value of A is represented by the blue area inside that half of the box, and the value to B is represented by the red area on the other half of the box. Now, in a scenario that is typically win-lose, even if we don't intend it to be, to the degree that A wins, B has to lose. And likewise, to the degree that B wins, A has to lose. The result is a construct that is limited to the box formed by the combination of party A's and party B's value at any point in the process. A conventional mindset doesn't think outside this box. So regarding models, let's talk about these. Models are resources that can help guide our thinking. In many cases, the models are visual in nature, which can help us both learn and retain them as primary mental models in the future. An example of a relevant model here is the basic illustration for Innogotation itself. What you see here is in the lower portion of the diagram, the earlier starting point of a typical negotiation process, which was limited to the quote-unquote inside the box thinking of a win-lose scenario. Without the use of models, our thinking may proceed along typical lines, which of course, for many of us, is to think in an either-or win-lose fashion. But consider what happens if we allow ourselves to think outside that box, to challenge and explore shattering the constraints that our bias-driven conventional wisdom has always had us believe. The result of this may look something like this expanded diagram. Now, each party is not limiting itself to the original mindset assumptions. Rather, it has expanded the scope of the values, the stakeholders, the resources, and the ways of applying them to discover ways to generate completely new value. Now, this new value experienced by both parties, not just one, is shown as the area under the curve of the resulting triangles above and outside of the earlier box. Both parties have been able to think and act and thus enjoy new value created far outside that original box. And even if the ultimate solution tends to favor one party over the other, the crucial difference here is that both parties gain, and in many cases, they gain much more value than they would have if they pursued the conventional approach. So how did they do this, you might ask? They did it by reframing their conventional interpretation of the negotiation process and seeing each of their roles as creative problem solver. But the crucial difference here is that each party is primarily trying to solve the other party's problem. They keep a portion of their focus on their own challenges, of course, but the reciprocal focus is what accelerates the process. In this approach, each party is seeing the other's problem with fresh eyes. They ask themselves a series of questions that challenge conventional wisdom, challenge assumptions, both conscious and unconscious. They accomplish this powerful new perspective by using yet another tool, a unique innovation tool called QB. QB is a model of logic that helps to both trigger and guide you in something called divergent thinking, one of the cornerstones of the creative problem-solving process. QB reminds you to ask and then explore repeatedly the who, what, where, when, how, and why type questions that stimulate your imagination. These questions help you challenge your limiting assumptions. For example, that there are no other resources, people, or opportunities to create value other than the ones that are currently on the table. It can challenge all of the assumptions that we stated earlier, and much, much more than that. QB is not only for brainstorming, but also for a number of other benefits. Just one of these is the elimination of blind spots that any of us might have in our plans, designs, strategies, or solutions for resolving conflicts and problems. There are many more models that can be and are often used in creative negotiations. But let's stop here with just these two in the interest of time. Regarding methods, from here, we can move on to discussing the methods that affect our behaviors and actions and speech. There's a wide range of methods that are used in both negotiation and in creative problem solving, or CPS for short. Among those popular in negotiation can be found in classic books such as Getting to Yes by Fisher and Urey. These are often extremely effective, and I would advocate for keeping them solidly in your negotiation toolbox. But while the classic approaches are great basic resources, they often do not go far enough in terms of innovating and creatively solving problems. For this, we may need to supplement with additional methods. Now, the CPS process is one that you may want to use here. It's by no means the only choice. Others that might work about as well include things like Six Sigma, Lean, synectics, trees, the De Bono process, design thinking, something called VSure, and many others. But let's just stick with CPS for now, since it's essentially the grandfather of most of these other ones. CPS consists of 4 basic phases that repeat within a cycle, including clarification, ideation, development, and implementation. Within each of these phases, there are a variety of tools and models that might be used. We won't discuss most of them here, but one construct that exists in each phase is the use of both divergent and convergent thinking. In a nutshell, divergent thinking is the discipline of coming up with lots and lots of ideas that are diverse, whereas convergent thinking is where you try to narrow down these ideas into the very best few to work with. Either way, both divergence and convergence are constantly going on throughout the entire CPS process. Now let's look at each of these 4 phases. Clarification includes how you gather all the initial important information about a problem as a means of ultimately creating an effective problem statement. This involves asking lots of questions, ensuring that you understand the answers clearly and consistently with others, and challenging your own and others' assumptions. It may also include doing research, for example, on the industry conditions of the other party, their financial and growth track record, if it's publicly available, the hot trends going on among their technologies, and even understanding their competitive landscape. Once you sufficiently understand the problem, you can move on to ideation. Here, you will begin to come up with ideas for the resources and methods to use to create solutions that may help solve the problem you just identified. This too involves asking a lot of questions, as you do in using the QB model, generating long lists of both basic and wild, crazy ideas, and doing so using as wide a variety of stakeholder participants as you can. This process is commonly referred to as group brainstorming, but you can certainly do this on your own at any time. Hopefully, toward the end of the phase, you'll be able to whittle down this long list into much smaller best candidate lists that will provide guidance for the next phase to come, which is development. Development is then the opportunity to come up with a specific, actual, tangible, and tactical design for the solution that you plan to use to solve the problem, your other party's problem. There are myriad ways that you might use a range of different resources to create this specific solution. And so there are ample opportunities where you'll gain use both, that you'll again use both divergent and convergent thinking to help you along, as well as many participants. For example, in a negotiation, both party A and party B may consist of not just one person, but an entire team of folks who bring unique skills and experiences to the table. Each team may at times operate by themselves on their own, but many also may want to periodically check in with the other team to ensure that what they have in mind is generally of interest and value to the other party. And finally, implementation involves taking the basic solution you've just developed and considering the specific and appropriately contextual way to put it into practical use. Implementation may require some level of brief, risk-controlled experimentation. Actually, some of this may also be done in the development phase. But this is meant to get rapid and relevant feedback from the real world that will provide data and confidence that anointing the solution in real life will be effective, safe, valuable, and durable, to be judged by both your team and, of course, the other party's team as well. Now, metrics. The metrics you may want to use to help measure and assess progress along the way can be quite varied. There's no one right answer here, but certainly it behooves you to discuss and come up to some basic level of agreement with the other party as to how you'll measure both interim and final success. When following a new and different approach to negotiation, it is important to understand a lot of aspects of the components involved. To contemplate this, it is helpful to again think outside the box of what you might typically measure. For example, if you're going to be deliberately, candidly, and consciously thinking win-win, each party may want to disclose additional information about themselves, about their negotiation style, which may help improve the prospects of harmony and ultimate success. One idea here is to conduct any number of problem-solving, thinking, personality, or leadership style assessments prior to the process even beginning. The lead negotiator, or individual who will likely be doing most of the back and forth communication with the other party, in each case should be most interested in the nuances of their counterparts' thinking, preferences, and behavior. This information, of course, is intended for the win-win outcome, not for one party to then exploit and take advantage of the other. One such assessment is an instrument designed to understand an individual's preferences for the 4 phases of the CPS process. This instrument is called Foresight. Foresight was designed specifically for the creative problem-solving process, but has also been used extensively within a variety of other problem-solving or negotiation methodologies. What Foresight does is measure the relative energy that an individual naturally and subconsciously allocates to one or more of the 4 phases of the process. It does not measure ability or strength of skills. Rather, it helps you to know which activities you are typically predisposed to gravitate toward. Knowing this information can be extremely helpful, not only to the individual, but also to their teammates, and of course to the other individuals and teams beyond their own, where collaboration is important. And if everybody knows each other's type, they can not only then consciously optimize their plans and behaviors, but also be conscious of and avoid potential conflicts that are likely to arise if these insights were not known. Now, shown here is a sample graph that shows that this individual has strong preferences in both the ideation and implementation phases. Again, this is not an indication of ability. Rather, it merely shows where that person is likely to spend most of their time, energy, and effort within the CPS process. If this person is paired up with someone who has, say, preferences for both clarification and development, then together they make a powerful and effective team that covers all the bases, so to speak, and is less likely to experience conflict with one another, especially if they both remain aware and conscious of their own and the other's thinking profiles and problem-solving styles. There are many other metrics that could be considered, such as the time it takes to complete the entire negotiation cycle, the frequency of conflicts experienced, the number of times each team is willing to discuss new alternatives, and so on and so on. We don't need to explore all of these at this time. Suffice it to say, we all need to be empathetic about which metrics we consider and ultimately use. And by the way, Foresight is by no means the only assessment you could use. Others that you may consider are the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, DISC, Strength Finders, the Herman Brain Dominance Inventory, and many, many others just like that. So, in summary, the Innogotation process can be an effective means of rethinking the conventional innovation process. Conventional negotiation process. It can be examined through at least 4 lenses, those 4 M's that we listed earlier. But it's also important to understand why these 4 elements are important. And the major reason why is because each one corresponds to a crucial universal learning cycle called BTAC, or Belief, Thought, Action, Consequence. What you see here is that each of the 4 M's corresponds with one key element of this BTAC innovation learning cycle. Mindsets are a reflection of our beliefs. Models help guide our thinking. Methods help guide our actions. And metrics help us to make sense of, learn about, and gain insights from the consequences of our actions. As you can see, beliefs lead to thoughts, thoughts lead to actions, actions lead to consequences, and the understanding that we get, the insights we gain from those consequences can help us form new, refined beliefs, which may manifest as values. Presumptions, biases are still affecting us, and often unconsciously. So within each of the BTAC elements, you can also see that I've listed a few important components within each one. Those highlighted are the ones considered to be the key drivers of the element that follows it in the process. So I want to thank you all for joining me today, and I look forward to any questions or comments you might have. If you have time for any now, I'll gladly respond to them, but if not, then please feel free to contact me at the address below. I'll be more than happy to reply to you, as well as send you copies of this presentation for your further review. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the session.
Thank you so much, Johnny, for this very insightful presentation. I have seen that we've had many live viewers, so if you have any questions, now is the time to type them in the chat box. So I will be monitoring those comments and questions to invite Charlie to answer them. I know there is a little delay with all of the technology, so in the meantime, I may ask Charlie a question about the interaction of the 3 M's and how can we ensure that we make a wise use of this model, because there are 4 elements, the 4 M's. So how do they interact with each other, and how can we make the best use of this methodology when we negotiate as lawyers?
Great question, Tessa. So I think you meant 4 M's, right? Because
yes.
Mindset, models, methods, and metrics. Sure. So they interact with each other in that they all represent some sort of reflection of or guidance to the basic components of an innovation or a creative problem-solving process, which are influenced by our beliefs, our thoughts, our actions, and our consequences. You may have heard, for example, an old adage that is that every action begins with a thought. And so from that, you can conclude generally that thoughts lead to actions, or actions are driven by thoughts. And you have also probably heard the old adage, all actions have consequences, and therefore that's where consequences follows actions. Our experiential learning from the consequences of our actions is really what winds up guiding our belief system, our value system, what we believe to be true, what we believe to be important, what we believe to be priority. And of course, those beliefs are not always, but generally, they're subconscious. They are forming within us implicitly. And those then drive our active thinking, what we're more conscious of. And within those that thinking process, you may recall, the key driver are the choices that we make. And those choices are informed by the way we have also been thinking about, as I mentioned before, some of the assumptions around, hey, the only way to solve this problem is one way. The only outcome that's going to be acceptable to either me or to the other party is what we went in sort of demanding. And that's just not always, and very often is it the case at all. Rather, it's a matter of getting each party to sort of become unmired in their own inside the box thinking, and sort of step outside that box and consider alternatives, even if those alternatives are not immediately apparent, if they're not visual, if you can't see them, feel them, if you don't know about them, if you're not aware of them. It doesn't mean that they don't exist. It just means you haven't found them yet. And so that's why using those tools, models, if you will, to help guide your thinking will give you opportunities to get outside of your box, to challenge your own conventional wisdom, and to basically use your imagination for identifying new opportunities, new resources, new ways of using those resources, and dispel myths that are simply holding you back from creating new value in new ways. Does that help to clarify?
Yes, that's very interesting and very insightful to have a process that can be sort of integrated within the legal metrics. Because as lawyers or as mediators, there are different sets of rules that can be used in order to better negotiate for our client. What's interesting from your presentation is you're adding another layer, a creative layer, which can be merged and therefore can create more value and not just claim the existing value. So I think that's very interesting topics that we don't hear very often at universities, for instance, or in trainings that we are used to follow. Anything you want to add for our audience? Do you want to add maybe a message, a final quote, or call to action?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that has struck me over the years in talking with lawyers, attorneys, or people involved in that sort of structured negotiation is that many lawyers, in fact, the vast majority I've ever spoken with, would say from their own perspective that they're not very creative and they're not innovative at all. And I find that really curious as to why they think that. And it could very well be because they've been trained to think so rigidly within the confines of the law and the statutes as they are spelled out and read out from papers or other documents. And in fact, I think it's merely that lawyers feel that they don't have the ability or the right to think outside the box. But many of them that I have spoken with, in fact, most of them, are not only highly intelligent, but very, very creative. They just don't realize it. They don't think of themselves as being creative. And what I think, if my message is here, if you can stop thinking about yourself as not being creative, assimilate a new mindset, learn by practicing, and realize that you can create new value using these tools, models, and methods, and metrics, then your mindset will eventually change. It'll change over time, and it'll develop into something that is really and truly a very, very powerful and effective approach to solving problems, to designing, to developing strategies, to motivating yourself and others. It applies to every bit of the work that you do and the work that even non-lawyers do. So it really is something that I think lawyers give themselves too much of a bad rap when it comes to things like innovation and creativity. You ought to start thinking differently than that.
Well, that's a very good thing to know. And live presentation. Thank you so much, Charlie, for your time and for sharing your knowledge and this very insightful model. Charlie will be in the online community, which I will be announcing later at the closing session. There is an online community to continue sharing, learning, and celebrating together. So Charlie, I think you will be able to post a little note there so people will see you if they want to ask questions in the community after the event.
Absolutely. And now I'm looking forward to hearing all the other presenters. I'm really excited about the topics that are coming up next.
So the next presenter is Sabine Bogen. So we will be closing this room for a very short 1-minute break, and you may enter this other room that will be open with the link that you have received. If you are watching the YouTube live, I think the YouTube live should be continuing without interruptions, but if it does, just go back to the link and jump in the next conference room with Sabine and myself. Thank you again, Charlie, and we will see you very soon online.
Thank you, Tessa. Bye-bye.